Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so today, dogs are after something out there. Hey. Hey, Wyatt, hush. That's okay. There's a van outside, a black van that has Prime with the little blue swoop on it. I didn't know that Amazon had their own delivery trucks now. That's kind of cool, huh? Okay, so where was I? Aha! So today it's Saturday, and you know we settling in a new place and everything. Springtime. Today's the 2nd of May. And we're getting ready to, start the garden and start getting all our plants in the dirt here at the new place and everything. In fact, we're waiting on one call to give us the okay to go ahead and till up the garden. My wife's got a nice, actually a pretty big chunk of land there for a garden. Pretty ambitious. I think it's like a 40 by 45 foot, something like that. And so I was actually she had me talked into putting her roses into the dirt today, and it's raining. And so we're not doing that, so I'm going to go ahead and sneak out here in the shop and get some work done. Actually, you know what, before we get on to the video, which by the way, this is going to be video number 22 if I remember right. We got the pins peened yesterday in the last video, and now we're basically just dressing the knife up and getting it ready for a sheath. And that's not going to take so very long, so let's take a little side trip. So I think I've mentioned to you guys about we're going to do this instead. I see an awful lot of people doing this all the time, where they grab the camera and they like look at themselves as they're walking, so we're going to try it. I'm pretty sure I've shown you the grow room, my meat cooler that I decided, hey, let's go ahead and use it for starting seeds. And it's doing really, really good. I've been cutting down an awful lot of trees lately. Different places, the trees have becoming problems, dropping branches on roofs and stuff like that. So I figured I probably ought to start replacing them, and this is what we've got going on. I was keeping the door closed. I've got 3 halogen lights, one there, one there, one there, and then an LED light in here. These ones right here are the T5 fluorescent lights with the little itty bitty light bulbs. And so we've got the bottom shelf is the stuff that my wife's got going on mostly. This one right here, I think, are some papaya trees that my boy started from a papaya that he bought at the grocery store. There's some trees and some other plants in there. I think this right over here is blue spruce seeds that I just put in the dirt this morning, I think. A couple of blueberry bushes from Home Depot, if I remember right. These right here are some nectarine cuttings that I got off eBay that I'm trying the whole rooting thing with. The one in the back, plus these back in here are apple and plum cuttings from my first house that I'm trying the rooting thing on. We've got a nectarine tree bought from Lowe's, some monstrosity of Black Prince tomato plants that I actually started these back in the old house in like October, November, something like that, and they're freaking huge. I mean, they're every bit, well, no, that one in the back there, heck, it's every bit as tall as I am. That's 6 foot tall. So they're going kind of wild. And here we've got, oh man, we've got all kind of stuff. We've got mostly apple seeds. There's a little nectarine from seed, a whole bunch more that I'm waiting on. One of my fig trees that I thought was actually dying in the house is waking up nicely out here. A new fig tree, these are both Chicago Hardies. Picked this one up from Home Depot. Some star fruit trees that my boy planted from seed that when I brought him out here, or he brought him out here because he was running out of room around the kitchen sink. And you know, this is an awful lot drier in here, so all these leaves died back, but now he's getting some new ones. Hazelnut, more apple trees, another nectarine in the back. Just going kind of crazy, I guess. But kind of the idea, I've been reading and following this fella, his name's David the Good. Very entertaining, sounds like a very knowledgeable guy. I have got brown thumbs, so I don't think it would take a whole lot to impress me when it comes to gardening. But he's got a very cool writing style, and I like him a lot. So I got all his books, and he says to grow an awful lot of stuff from seed. So like an apple tree, you grow it from seed. If you don't like the apples it produces, or if it doesn't produce any apples, then graft you know, a scion of some other wood or another apple tree that you know makes good apples onto it, and apparently it works out. I don't know, but you know, it sounds kind of fun. So anyway, so our two knives that we peened the pins in yesterday, okay? The tester one with my old style of peening the pins came out beautifully. The one with my new technique that I, like I said, I've only done like 100 knives on this way. I completely screwed it up, and the reason for that was because I wasn't grinding the pins flat. They had that pinched. End from the mini bolt cutters, and what was happening was, you know, when you put them in there, as you hit it, that comes down to a point, and I believe it was letting it turn. So I ground those flat and worked just like I remember it working. So, you know, so I guess being in the new shop is still, you know, not quite completely comfortable and everything in here, but we're getting there. So anyway, so I ended up grinding off the jacked up pins, and it actually turned out to where, I mean, it's serviceable, okay? I mean, it's a total screw up, but it is a serviceable screw up, which means that I'm not going to sell this particular one, but not unless I decide to rip the handle off and replace the handle, because that just looks, you know, honestly, that's not something I would sell anymore. When I first started out, you know, that was absolutely something I would sell, but, you know, as you work in any craft, your standards should go up the longer and the more experience that you have, right? And I don't like that. So I think I'm actually going to lend this to another fella that, and I'm going to have him test it for me. And then that way we get two opinions of the same pattern. Okay, so where we are on this pattern now is we've got our handle installed. I hand sanded it down to 220 grit. The handle feels good, okay? So now we need to finish this off and get it ready for a sheath, okay? So the first thing that we need to do, while the tape is still on the blade, okay, I don't really shape the front edge of these scales very much before I epoxy them. In fact, you saw I don't really shape them very much at all before I epoxy them. And I do almost all the shaping after they're installed to the tang. So this, oh, here, I'll turn you around, looked quite a bit like these handles. Okay, these are just a batch of 8-inch chefs. But see how blocky they are? And then the top face right here is cleaned off. Okay, so what we need to do now is we've got this really, really sharp corner right here. Okay, first of all, it's not very comfortable in a pinch grip. Second of all, those corners will absolutely hang up on your Kydex sheath when you go to resheath it. All right, the simplest and easiest way to fix that is to grab this. Doc, take that over there. You go with him, Wyatt. Is to take this, the shop roll, the cloth-backed 220 grit, this stuff. I mean, you don't have to use this, but I don't use that stuff very much anymore for shaping handles, so I might as well find a use for it since it's here in the shop. You could take regular sandpaper and fold it over, you know, to make it a little bit stiffer, and then now honestly just come up in here and just round that corner out. You know, while the blade is all taped up, there is the possibility that you're going to cut through that tape or scratch a portion where, you know, the tape isn't covering, but it usually is not that big of a deal. I mean, I guess if I was making art knives, you know, I might, you know, really tape the heck out of this. But, you know, my biggest, I don't know if you would call it claim to fame or, you know, style of knife is using knives. So, you know, the only art that I really see in my knives are, you know, the way they function, you know, the way they make your daily life easier. Or, you know, heck, somebody might not even call that art at all, and you know, that's cool too. Okay, so we knock that corner off those. We've got a little bit more here on the face of this part right here. It feels a little bit sticky, so we might actually touch that to the grinder right quick. Okay, and speaking of which, that is going to be our next step with this, is we got to head to the grinder. All right, first of all, we got to take our tape off and remember what the blade looked like. This is always kind of cool. Okay, so we got our tape off, and we got to remember what the thing looks like, and it's starting to look like a not such a bad blade here, with the exception of the jacked up pinheads. Okay, so our next step is going to be to come up in here, and we're going to clean this off. Okay, actually this one I actually got all the fire scale off of it already, but we're going to come back in and clean this part off, because especially right in here in the transition between your handle and your blade, when you have the blade taped up and your hand sanding the handle, a lot of times there'll be nastiness up in here to where this doesn't match this. So it only takes a half a second, you know, to run the whole thing across the belt grinder and smooth that out. Okay, then we're going to turn the blade this way to the belt grinder, and we're going to come in and we're going to knock that sharp corner off both sides of the spine here. Okay, we knocked them off of this part, you know, when we were grinding the handle. But this part right here is still very sharp and very uncomfortable. Okay, so we're going to fix that, and I think we're also going to just barely touch this portion right here, because that's, I mean, it's not going to injure me, but it is a little bit tacky and a little bit uncomfortable. So let's go clean that up. Okay. This is a 220 grit belt, and I wish it was a little bit more worn, because taking this corner off is going to put an awful lot of wear on it, because it's going to tend to scrape some of the abrasive particles off the face of the belt. We're going to want to do the spine on the platen, and then come up in here and get this on the slack part of the belt that does not have a platen behind it, okay, because that'll make it a little bit more rounded, and you won't get like chatter marks quite so much. So let's get you, okay, so there's the wheel, there's the platen, there's your slack belt portion. See how I can push that belt in right there? Okay, so this won't take hardly but a second. I'd forgotten about that right to the last second. Okay, so that feels way more comfy now, okay? Now since this is a hand sanded blade, we'll probably need to come back and then just take these lines, because right now these lines are going this way, and then just pull them this way, okay? Which, since the metal's been removed and all we're doing is just pulling some scratches out, it won't take very long at all. Okay, now our next step is going to be roughing in an edge. Okay, now when you rough in an edge, so this is kind of sort of sharpening, okay, because we are basically we're going to be beginning to shape the initial edge on the knife, right? Okay, up until this point, you remember me talking, actually I'll probably want to look you in the face for this because it's pretty important, okay? So remember me talking when you know, all the way back into the heat treat, right? And I said, you know, for this style of knife and everything, I'd much rather heat treat at full thickness, okay, and then come back in and grind after heat treat, right? And what was one of the biggest reasons that I enjoy or like to do it like that is because this steel that you're going to grind away anyway, okay, you can call it sacrificial steel that's going to protect that future cutting edge, okay? Now, if we did a good job in grinding it, okay, then the steel that's right on the very edge is the steel that was exposed to the heat in the kiln when we heat treated it, right? Which means that that steel had been exposed to 1500 degree temperature repeatedly, which means that there's a high likelihood that we burn some of the carbon out right there along the edge, okay? A lot of times when you get a factory knife, the very edge is actually damaged steel because of that, okay? Or because of power sharpening, all right? Two of the things that we're trying to avoid, all right? The way you can tell if you've got a knife that's got damaged steel like that is, it kind of depends. I mean, it depends on your skill as a user and as a sharpener also, all right? But if you take a knife and you pull it right out of the box and, you know, it's got a decent edge, or if you put a decent edge on it, right? And then you go cut with it and you're like, man, you know, from what I was cutting, it sure didn't seem like it kept an edge for very long. All right? Now, we're talking like you didn't wreck an edge, like hit a staple or a nail or, you know, a rock or anything like that. But let's say you were cutting rope or something, okay? And, you know, it just dulled kind of quick. And then the second time you sharpen it, well, it seems like it holds an edge a little bit longer. And the third time you sharpen it, now all of a sudden it's holding an edge like it should. Okay? If that happens, you know, it could be because they didn't either they didn't take any steel off when they were sharpening it, and so you've got steel that was exposed to the high temperatures of heat treat and it got damaged, decarbed, or, you know, whatever, or that they burned the edge when they were sharpening on power equipment. All right, so what we need to do is we need to knock off you either knock, hey, hush. So you either knock off some of the edge right off the bat, or when you sharpen, you raise a fairly heavy burr and use that to knock off the, you know, use it as sacrificial steel to knock off the steel that was exposed to the high heat. Either way, be very careful at this stage, okay? Because this grinder will produce enough heat that it can burn that steel, and you'll have to grind that steel back off with a stone before you get back into good steel again, okay? So, also, this portion right here really kind of depends, okay? Like those paring knives out there, more than likely I will not rough the edges in on a grinder because they're already at, I typically shoot for 3 to 5 thousandths of an inch thick at the shoulder of the cutting edge, okay? So that means that at the very edge, those paring knives right now are probably at 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch thick, all right? Which is way too little of steel to remove to bother with the belt grinder, all right? With a Norton coarse or a medium or even a fine crystalline stone, you'll remove a couple of thousandths like that. So there's not really any point in going to the grinder. This particular knife, as I'm looking at the edge right now, from here to here is fairly thin. Okay, I would just take that off with a stone. Okay, from here to here, the portion of the knife that gets abused probably the most, I left it thicker. Okay, and the reason for that is because tip's taken an incredible amount of abuse. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll grind a blade, you know, to where it's thinner up in here and then thicker up in here, almost like a reverse. So the blade itself has got distal taper, right? So it's thicker here than it is here. But then the edge is reverse of that. So you have thinner here where you're going to be sharpening pencils or, you know, cutting your fingernails, stuff like that, and then thicker from here to here where you're gonna, that tip is gonna be getting you into a deer or an elk, you know, to dress it out, or you know, you're gonna be well, tips just take abuse, you know, so they need to be a little bit on the thicker side. So here I would absolutely just grind that with a stone. Here to here we're probably looking at, okay, so here we're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe 5 to 8 thousandths of an inch thick. From here to here, we're looking at probably 10-ish up to 15-ish, okay? So still a fairly lean grind, all right? So what we're gonna wanna do, when I rough in an edge on a belt, I don't like J-flex belts, so let's pull this one off. And let's see if I've got, we want kind of a slightly worn, like 110, 120-ish, something like that. Ah, there we go. Okay, so this here is a 120 grit Norton Blaze. It's still got some bite to it. It's not brand new. Heck, it's not even new. It's slightly worn. But it's still got some bite to it. We're going to grind with the edge down. Okay, now you need to be looking at the belt, not at me. In fact, I might want to bring you... Yeah, okay, let's see if I can tilt the camera up and then get this thing out of the way. No, let's go the other way. Maybe like that. Okay, how does that look? Okay, so we really want the edge going down, okay, so that all these abrasive particles take the steel off the edge and then take it away, okay? And then also so that the grit that's in your grinding belt, think of it as boulders, okay? Those boulders are going to be scraping past the edge, not jamming into the edge, okay? Very, very light touch. If you have a variable speed grinder, like my little 3-wheel over there, you know, now would be a good time to use it. And you're basically just roughing the edge in, okay? You can bring a burr up if you want to, if you're comfortable enough doing that, or you can just kind of get it thinned down and then wait to bring up the burr on the stone. All right, here we go. Okay, so that is it. There was never really any heat that went into the edge. I did not bring it to a burr, but it is pretty close and ready. So now let's go ahead and go back to our stone. Okay, so now before we get too much farther, whatever kind of sandpaper you have that's already on your, your sanding stick, just swapped around like that. Okay, in this case, it was 600 grit sandpaper was the last grit I was using, and that'll be more than enough to take these scratches out of the spine. Okay, we're just trying to smooth them scratches out and finish our last bit of rounding out of the spine. Oh yeah, that feels really good. Okay, now there's no rough spots on my thumb. Okay, so I can use that with my thumb behind it, for an extended period of time and not chew my hand up. I can also come up like this, and it's still very comfortable on my index finger, for doing fine detail cuts. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sharpen this thing. It's not going to be its final sharpening, we're just still roughing the edge in, and we're playing with that new Norton medium crystalline and fine India. I haven't got to play with this stone very much, so we're going to go ahead and use it. Since we didn't bring up a burr on the grinder, we are going to bring up a fairly heavy burr on this edge right now to get rid of that steel. Okay. Now, angles, all right? I don't use angle guides. You guys have seen me sharpen before, okay? It's entirely freehand. And it's typically very fast, okay? Because honestly, that's just the way I sharpen. Most of the time when I'm sharpening, I need to get an edge on something, get it on there quick, get that knife back in service so that I can keep working, right? When you're sharpening your personal knife, one of your rules as far as your angles are concerned is that if you lower that angle enough to where you start getting scratches on the finish of the blade, that's where you need to be. Okay? You sharpen at a very low angle, then if you get edge damage, then you slightly raise your angle up some, and then, sharpen at that until the edge damage goes away. All right. This is a nice working EDC type of knife, okay? Even though it's a belt knife and we can stand a little bit heavier weight versus a neck knife, we still want a nice thin light edge, okay? That's what I'm after with this pattern. So this is a nice everyday use type of knife, okay? If you're building a knife for, say, like law enforcement, or fire department or somebody like that, somebody that, makes their living either fighting with a knife or doing rough, they could be called upon to use the knife in a rough manner, build that thing a little bit thicker, build in stouter edges, okay? Fine edge holding might be secondary in that type of application than a little bit extra strength, okay? This knife is, I'm building this knife for me to carry. I'm not a law enforcement guy. I'm not a EMT or a fire department or a soldier or, any of that kind of stuff, okay? I'm a normal, everyday, average Joe. I use my knife to open boxes from Amazon, dress deer and antelope and rabbits and, trim my fingernails, cut strings, just kind of normal everyday use. So for that, I want a nice thin edge that cuts very efficiently. Okay? All right, so we're going now that being said, when I'm making a knife for sale, I typically put a little bit higher of an angle on there and do not scratch the finish because a lot of people don't really like seeing a scratched up finish. I don't really see how that matters, but that's the way a lot of people are. So okay, so we got a pretty heavy burr on this side. Okay, we got almost, and we got our burr from heel to tip on the other side. Okay, now we're going to switch sides on our stone, and now we're going to refine that burr, smooth it up, and then get rid of it. Okay, because we don't want it scratching the inside of our Kydex sheath while we make it. Okay, so we had our burr the last time on this side. Now we can check it, and it looks to me like I was a little bit lower edge angle on this side. I got to talking and went back to my normal where I would like to sharpen. So we'll lower the angle on this one a little bit to try to match that angle on the other side. A lot of people get entirely too caught up in having perfect edges, okay? As in, like, the edge bevel is the same width from the heel to the tip, and that they match perfectly from side to side, right? You know, that's like making sure that you have an absolute perfect grind on the end of your favorite flathead screwdriver, right? I mean, you know that that screwdriver is going to be used for more than just driving screws. You know, you're going to use it to be opening paint cans and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Well, the same way with this knife, right? I mean, even the edge that, you know, that I provide on the knife when I sell it to somebody, you know that edge, well, you hope that that knife gets used enough to where it gets dulled in the first, you know, 2 or 3 weeks worth of that person owning that knife. If it doesn't, then that means that they don't like the knife and that they're not using the thing. I mean, a knife is built to cut and to work and to serve man or woman or whoever it is that's carrying the thing, and to make their life easier. If it's not working, if it's not cutting, and if it's not getting dull, then it's not serving you, right? Okay. So we have a pretty good edge on there. We'll go ahead and shear the last of that burr off. What I did there was I took the clean oil that was on this side of the stone and moved it to this side of the stone to kind of flush some of the crap off the top of the stone. Let's get one more burr shearing stroke here. Okay. So that's good edge that ought to take hair off my arm. And it does. Okay. So that's the first edge that knife ever got in, I don't know, I didn't time it, but a couple of minutes. Okay. So our last step that we need to do is, remember I said that we took quite a bit, you know, we took a pretty heavy burr off this, right? Is this step right here, okay? Personally, I like having that little step plus a little bit of a recess where that edge starts. A lot of people don't like it, and plus there's a couple of light little scratches in there from when we were grinding the profile, if I remember right. Yeah. So let's go ahead and take those out and then also kind of smooth this up a little bit more. Now for that, what we want to do is turn our stone sideways. We'll grab some oil off the face of it and put it up in here. Up in, yeah, you can see that. No, actually, let's do that. Let's put some more oil and do it down here so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, because nobody ever said that you have to use just the face of the stone, all right? Now we're just going to grind that off some. And it's an awful sound, like nails on a chalkboard. Now I've got that tilted to where just that portion is hitting, not the edge. Okay, so that shined that up. Now let's knock the corners off of it. Yeah, nobody ever said that you have to use just the face of your stone, okay? In fact, you know, shape the corners on the stone or the sides however you want to. I've got a video that I shot a little while ago about how to sharpen a serrated bread knife when you don't have, you know, a sharpening rod. You know, like one of them little bitty diamond thought I had one up here, but I guess I don't. One of the little bitty diamond rods, you know, that you can use to get up in the serrations. Okay, there we go. Now while you're here, go ahead and put a drop of oil on the handle. Kind of rub it in, and then we kind of get to see what the handle's going to look like too. All right. I'll wipe most of the oil off my hands first. This is where all my old t-shirts go, is on the handle of this drawer. Okay, now we're actually wiping some of those oxides from the etching. We're wiping some of those off. Okay, because our next step is going to be making a sheath for this. So we want to make sure that the knife is fairly clean so that we don't put a whole lot of extra trash in that sheath. Kydex is really easy to wash out and everything, but you might as well not. I mean, if you can help putting extra trash in there, you know, why not? So there we go. So this is pretty much the finished knife when you're shaking and everything. Okay. All right, so you can see we've got our hardening line. It is still a little bit low right here, but you know, that right there is going to be, you know, for me, I'm really rough on my knives because part of my job is, as a knife maker, is testing, you know, being rough on them. You know, being rougher than most anybody else will be. You know, doing silly stuff like cutting nails and, you know, cutting rope for days and, you know, just beating them up so that I can see what they take, right? So that amount of hard edge right there. Now this part here will probably never get sharpened as much, so it'll probably end up being up in here as the knife wears back. Okay, so this right here, you know, for me, I would probably wear that out in probably 4 or 5 years, something like that. You know, but I'd much rather, you know, that it was up in here or so, you know, on a knife that I would sell. It being 3/32 of an inch thick, you know, honestly, this wouldn't be bad at all. But we got a nice smooth handle that's 220 grit. It's fairly attractive. I do like it when Cocobolo does this thing, you know, where you have your layers, like the little stripes going up. Everything is smooth. It's smooth where it needs to be and sharp where it needs to be sharp. In fact, I don't want to push much more than that. Otherwise, I'd probably split my thumb open. So, you know, besides the pins being all jacked up, yeah, that side. Besides being the pins all jacked up, you know, that's actually going to be a really nice knife. Oh, your thumb pad test. See how that tip is starting to pick up the fingerprints on my thumb? That's another one of Murray's tests that he likes to see. And I like seeing it too. I mean, you know, it tells you the point's sharp. So I thought that was actually going to be a fairly quick video, and it wasn't. But we got to see our knife. It's all finished up and everything. Now all that's left to do, we need to make a sheath. And we're going to do the necker design of sheath just a little bit, you know, just to fit this. Okay, so that way, if somebody wants to carry it as a necker, and they've got good enough posture and a strong enough neck, you know, that it won't bother them, you know, then they can go ahead and carry it as a necker. And then it will have the same, the cord run through the rivets, you know, to make a belt loop out of it. Because I like that design, and I think it's very simple, and it works really good for me. I mean, heck, I carry one like that nearly every day and have for, I don't know, 5 or 7 or 8 years, something like that. And I really like it. So if I like it, you ought to also. Or there's a good chance that you ought to. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up this batch of pairs and get some blades hand sanded. These ones here, and then grind some handles and everything. And then the next chance I get, we'll go ahead and get the Kydex press out, and we'll go ahead and make a couple of sheaths for these, and then fine tune everything, and then put this project to bed. Because like I said, I think this is video number 22, and they're all half hour, 45 minutes long, so that's an awful lot of time watching me babble. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you're enjoying the build, hope you're enjoying seeing the knife come together, and yeah, we'll see you next time.